Austin's reverence for those who have served our nation reminds us of why we salute our flag, why we put our hands on our hearts for the Pledge of Allegiance, and why we proudly stand for the national anthem.
That was President Trump Tuesday throwing yet another sucker punch at those NFL players dared to protest social injustices during the national anthem this season. A season like no other, where the national conversation about race and sports, stoked repeatedly by none other than President Trump himself, often overshadowed the on-field action. And last week it was announced that sports journalist Jemele Hill, whose Twitter criticisms of the president, calling him a white supremacist, resulted in a public suspension from the ESPN network last year that I protested, would be leaving her former TV home to write for the network's website, The Undefeated. Jemele Hill, welcome to Politics Nation. I'm very happy to have you with us. I want to talk to you about Super Bowl, but first, clear the air, because you know a lot of us are really in love with you for your sports commentary, but also your stand-up and expressing yourself. Were you forced out of Sports Center, or was that your choice?
This was definitely 100% my choice. I approached my superiors about making a change because, and maybe a lot of people probably didn't know this, but I spent the majority of my career in print journalism. ESPN hired me in 2006 to be a print columnist. And so I often, wrote commentary, especially about issues revolving around race and sports. And so The Undefeated is a natural home for me, given that it's a site about the intersection between sports, African Americans, race, culture. It meshes all those things that I think are even more vital now to discuss. And I wanted to do it on a platform that was deeply aligned with who I was as a person. I respect a lot of the great journalists of color that they have at this site, and just so many of those in charge of it. So it was just really an opportunity for me to do great journalism. And look, SportsCenter is the legacy brand at ESPN. I had a great year doing the show, but it was not a fit for me. Because ultimately I had a lot of things that I really wanted to say and wanted to express, and the SportsCenter vehicle is not necessarily set up for that. So I wanted to be on a property that was.
Now, how did you feel as one who expressed yourself on Twitter and has been expressing yourself throughout your career? Because you are a journalist. You're not just somebody talking in between commercials about sports. How did you feel when you heard the president in a State of the Union address still take a shot at people that are standing up about injustices that you write about, I protest about? I mean, just out of nowhere, just decides he's going to take another shot. How did you feel watching that?
I wasn't surprised, and I think this is going to be probably a constant theme for the president because it's a very easy dog whistle. It's low-hanging fruit. It's what I like to call racial pornography because it's a way to stoke his base. And look, in a weird way, I think it's kind of weirdly brilliant because he has been able to hijack the entire conversation and to make this about patriotism. And really, if anybody knew just even the smallest bit of American history, they would understand that what the players have chosen to do is the most patriotic thing that you could. And Colin Kaepernick, who this conversation started with and still is very much the foundation of this conversation, his original thoughts about why he was protesting, he very clearly laid out a big reason is that he felt like military personnel, the people defending our country, that we were not living up to the ideals that that flag is supposed to represent. And that's why he chose to take a knee at the request of someone else who served in the military, being Nate Boyer. So I think because there's a lot of misinformation. A lot of people, frankly, just aren't interested enough or care enough about the things that are important to Colin Kaepernick and to the players protesting. It's been easy for them to latch on to ceremony as opposed to understanding what this cause is really about.
And what it's really saying, and what we're saying when we pledge allegiance, we ought to pledge allegiance to what it stands for. Jamil, the fact that you will now be writing and expressing your views, I don't think a lot of people understand, as we are at Super Bowl Sunday today, the whole problem of race in sports. Like over 70% of the players are black. I mean, you have more players now black than ever, but the ownership is almost all lily white. I mean, we still have not dealt with the problem of ownership, of business contracts, of the race question in terms of equity in sports itself.
Yeah, and this is a tension that has existed in sports ever since black athletes integrated into sports that were largely white. Here you have black athletes performing, for the most part, at the large request for the entertainment of mostly whites, owned by primarily teams that are owned by primarily white owners. And so there's always going to be this tension of race there. And I think a lot of people that watch players, a lot of people that employ players, they don't understand the duality that most people of color live in this nation, of the duality of what you do versus who you are and what it means to be black in America, which is quite simply all the players are trying to express and get owners and even the league commissioner to understand that regardless of the fact that they may make a certain amount of money, that they may play in a great sport, and that they, are competitors. Despite all that, that when they get in their cars, they're still subjected to much of the racism and institutional abuses, as if though they didn't have the other trappings of success. And one way that the NFL certainly hasn't been able to address some of those issues is by the fact that you have primarily white owners in decision-making positions, not just at the ownership level, at the GM level. A lot of people making the decisions don't look like the players who are actually playing on the field.
Well, that's why I thought it was so important, so heroic what Colin Kaepernick did. And frankly, what you did, because just because you own a team, you don't own a person. And I think that when someone has the courage to step out and stand up, we all need to stand and applaud that and let the owners know that there's backup. And I don't think you estimate the level of respect that it gives young women of all races and people of all races to say to people that, wait a minute, I'm a human being. I have feelings and I live in a reality that needs to be addressed.
Well, the way I view things is that, love is correction. And I love this country. I love being American. I love being a black American. And if I didn't love it as much, I wouldn't care about what it stood for or be disappointed by it. And I think that's kind of where Colin Kaepernick and I, where we're deeply aligned, is that he cares about this country. He cares about it living up to its ideals. And that's why it means a lot for him to continue to try to better it in the way that he can. And I know that a lot of people look at the money that he's made in his career, and for that matter, if they look at me and say, "Oh, you're on ESPN, what do you have to be concerned about?" I'm still a black woman in America. That's not going to change.
Right.
And still subjected to a lot of things. And besides, with my platform, and I'm sure again he views it the same way. And you know this better than anybody, Reverend, given how long that you fought for social justice, is that those who are able to sort of get to this point, you almost feel a deeper responsibility to make sure that you allow others to stand on your shoulders, because we all had to stand on somebody else's shoulders at some point or at many points in our lives.
Let me ask you this. Give me a hint of what you think is going to happen at the Super Bowl tonight.
Well, I do think that this game is going to be a lot closer than people imagine it to be. The Patriots, obviously, one of the most dominant teams ever in sports. I think it'll be close, but I think they'll wind up winning and further cementing their legacy as one of the most winningest teams and franchises that we've ever seen. I think something maybe along the lines of 28-24. I do think this game will be a lot closer than some people probably have imagined.
Well, thank you again for being on, Jamil, and thank you, Jamil, for being Jamil Hill.
Thank you for being Reverend Al.
Coming up, I have a tip for President Trump on how to increase black employment. Be right back.